reunión pronto. Ya vamos a empezar la reunión y la grabación.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes a todos. Welcome to the July 25 AB 617 Portside Steering Committee meeting. Bienvenidos a la reunión del Comité Directivo AB 617 de la comunidad Portside del 25 de julio. Vamos a darle unos poquitos momentos para gente del público para reunirse con nosotros. We'll give it a few moments for folks to join us from the public. Thank you all. Gracias a todos. At this moment, I'll hand over the microphone to our wonderful interpreter, Vicky, who will give instructions on how to access interpretation.
I will give the instructions first in Spanish and then I will give the instructions in English. Bienvenidos a los que van a unirse hoy en español. Bienvenidos sean todos y muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy. Antes de empezar la reunión, explicaremos las funciones necesarias para acceder a la interpretación simultánea al español. Si están utilizando su computadora portátil o computadora de escritorio, favor de localizar el icono con figura de globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla cuando este aparezca en un minuto y luego pulsen en Interpretación de lenguaje, Language Interpretation, y luego seleccionen el idioma español. Si están conectándose desde su teléfono, iPad o dispositivo similar, busquen el menú con los tres puntitos en la esquina superior del lado derecho de su pantalla y pulsen Interpretación de lenguaje y luego el español. Esto permite que escuchen a la traducción al español con un 80% de volumen y el audio en inglés se escuchará al fondo con un 20% de volumen. Tienen la opción de apagar el audio en inglés pulsando Mute Original Audio, ubicado en el mismo menú donde eligieron el idioma español. Gracias. Ahora paso al inglés. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. If you are using a laptop or a desktop computer, please look for the icon of the globe at the bottom of your screen when it appears in a moment, and then select Language Interpretation and then select English. If you're connecting to us with a telephone, iPad, or a similar device, please look for the three dots on the top right of your screen, click there, and then also choose Language Interpretation and then English. This will allow you to be able to hear anything that is stated during the course of the meeting in Spanish on the English channel. If you do not choose that channel and someone speaks in Spanish, you will not be able to hear them. Thank you very much, and go ahead, whoever is going to start the channels, and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. The interpretation channels are now open, so you are welcome to select the language of your choice, English or Spanish, or stay on this channel if you are bilingual. And if someone can confirm that the Spanish translation is coming through okay, that'd be great.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Once again, I would like to welcome everybody to the July 2023 Portside Community Steering Committee meeting. As mentioned in the meeting announcement and materials we sent earlier today, it'll be a shorter meeting than usual, but we do have a great presentation slated for today from the Sandag team. At this time, I'll hand it over to Anna, who'll go over the objectives and agenda for today.
Great, thank you, Chuy, and good afternoon, everyone. So for today's meeting objectives, the main objective for today's meeting is to learn about and also provide feedback on the San Diego Association of Governments, San Diego and Imperial County Freight Implementation Strategy. So we can go to the next slide. And for today's agenda, after we'll go ahead and start with roll call and then go over any general updates, followed by the approval of June's meeting notes and tonight's agenda, and then followed with the presentation from Sandag on the San Diego and Imperial Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy. And the next slide. And then we will close out today's meeting with public comments and closing remarks. As Chuy mentioned, today we have a light agenda, so hoping to get you all out of here within the hour. Just as a reminder for our meeting agreements, make sure to create space for everyone to contribute. Step up if you're more on the quiet side, step back if you've had a chance to contribute. Only one person speaks at a time. Listen to each other, respect each other's opinion, knowledge, and perspectives. Be conscious of time, and also please speak slowly and clearly for our interpreters. And so with that, we'll go ahead and move to the next item. So we'll go ahead and move along to roll call. And I'll be pulling up the attendance sheet. Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin with roll call. So if you are present, please make sure to come off mute, or if necessary, put it in the chat. Start us off, Keith Corey.
Here, sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Keith. Is Shelby also here? Okay, not seeing Shelby. Jack?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening. Hello, Jack.
I think Shelby is my alternate and she goes to the International Border Community
Got it.
subcommittee. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Keith. Massey?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Hello, good evening, Massey. Sarah?
Hi, I'm here. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Lydia?
I'm here. Hi.
Hello. Commissioner Sandy Naranjo?
Present.
Hello. Phil Gibbons?
I'm here.
Phil. All right, and Tim?
I'm here.
Joy Williams?
Good evening, I'm here.
Good evening, Joy. Thank you. Martin Reeder? David?
I'm here.
Hi, David. Dr. Stephanie Yoon?
I'm here.
Thank you. Jose Marquez Chavez? I see is here. Diane?
I'm here.
Hello, Diane.
Thank you.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm present, and just to let you know, AC Dumal no longer works with the Navy, but we will have another alternate soon.
Okay, great. Thank you for letting us know. Dinah?
I am here.
Hello, Dinah. Is Liana here as well?
No, she is not.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Philomena? Not seeing Philomena. Janice? Not seeing Janice. John?
Present.
Hello, John.
Present.
Thank you. Hillary?
I'm here.
Hi, Hillary. Thank you. Alicia Sanchez.
Presente.
Hola, Alicia. Gracias. Margarita Moreno. Not seeing Margarita. Naomi. Not seeing Naomi. Vanessa Contreras.
Present.
Hello, thank you. Salvador.
Present.
Thank you. Sylvia?
Present.
Yes, Sylvia, thank you. Ashley?
Present.
Thank you. Josephine? Josephine Talamantes?
Present.
Thank you. And then Maritza?
Present.
Thank you. Great. So with that, it looks like we meet quorum. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you all for showing up today. This is great attendance than what we expected originally. So great to see everybody. Now we're moving on to our agency and organization partner updates, starting with the Air District, and then down my list I have the California Air Resources Board, the Port of San Diego, Environmental Health Coalition, and IEA. And I see Tim has the hand raised too, so I'll add you to the list at the end from Sandag. Domingo?
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today again. I just wanted to just share a quick update that I will be sending out a more formal request later this week to all of our partner agencies to provide some information regarding implementation of the SERP. Any updates that you might have, we're going to work on preparing the annual update report for the Portside SERP, which is due to CARB on October 1st. So we're hoping to complete the report in the next month or so that we can present a summary of it to this committee in September, and then be able to submit it to CARB on October 1st. But expect something on your inbox later this week. This to all of our partner agencies that help us implement the SERP. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Domingo. Liliana?
Hi, good evening. Thanks, Chuy. Liliana Nunez from the California Air Resources Board. So tomorrow from 1 to 4 p.m., the AB 617 consultation group will be meeting to discuss the draft Blueprint 2.0, which is our draft version of the guidelines that we're updating after 5 years. These are the guidelines for how to implement AB 617 statewide. And I'll share the link to the meeting tomorrow, but I also want to highlight that we're seeking public comment on this version of the draft blueprint until the 31st of July. And then we'll update that. We'll use the feedback that we get in this public comment period to update the document for a final draft version in late August for CARB board's consideration in late September. So I can go ahead and drop the links in the chat, and just thanks for letting me make that announcement.
Great, thank you, Liliana, and appreciate the links. Moving along to Phil at the Port of San Diego.
Hi, thanks everyone. And I just wanted to let everybody know that the Port of San Diego recently released what we call our Trust Land Use Plan Discussion Draft Document. The document is out for review for 30 days, which closes on August 21st. The effort that we're going through is pursuant to Senate Bill 507, which granted the port around 8,000 additional acres of tidelands and submerged lands within San Diego Bay. So as many of you know, at the port, we sort of administer a thin band of land and submerged lands around the bay. But SB 507 actually granted the port the remaining portions of the submerged lands in San Diego Bay, which is mostly water and the land beneath it. This bill requires the port to develop what's called a trust land use plan that provides goals and policies for the allowable uses and activities within that new planning area. So the discussion draft was developed and just released last week. It's available for 30 days for the public to review. We encourage feedback on this plan and throughout the entire approval process. And this certainly will not be the only opportunity for public participation. once we receive initial comments, we'll go back to our board, and then that plan will go to the State Lands Commission for a conditional acceptance. Following that, the port will conduct environmental review, which will also include public participation. It'll be it needs to be certified by the California Coastal Commission, and then finally back to the State Lands Commission for final approval. So that's a lot of opportunity for people to weigh in on it, and we anticipate finalizing the plan in 2025. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that. I'll throw a link into the chat. And I notice Commissioner Naranjo has her hand up. Are you going to make a comment about this too?
No, separate topic.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I'll throw in the website where you can find the plan, and we encourage you to provide your feedback. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Phil. And moving on to Commissioner Sandy Naranjo from the port. Unmute.
Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so hi everyone, Commissioner Sandy Naranjo, appointee for National City on the Port of San Diego. And I just wanted to share with you all quickly that at the Port of San Diego, we're hosting a workshop for the National City Bayfront. This community workshop is free. It's going to be on August 9th at 6 p.m. It's going to be at the Longshoremen Local 29 Union Hall. And at this workshop, we're going to talk about all the millions of dollars that the Port of San Diego has invested in our National City Bayfront. The updates include electrification efforts at the National City Marine Terminal, the addition of shore power, and also the Pepper Park improvements, and also the free ride around National City, the Frank, which is a free shuttle program by Circuit and the City of National City with funding supported by the Port of San Diego. Also updates on the National City Balance Plan and the Tidelands Activation Program. So there's a lot of things going on, and we want to make sure everyone stays involved. Those are all about our clean air initiatives and our coastal access. So we invite all of you to join. Again, the event is free. We're going to have an interpreter, a Spanish interpreter, a Tagalog interpreter, and we're also going to provide food as well. So be ready, have dinner with us, celebrate with us, and get some great updates. And I would provide a flyer to Chewy so he could send to all of you with the address, and I'll provide the flyer in all the 3 languages.
Great. Thank you, Sandy. Moving along to EHC.
Hi, this is Joy. I don't have any specific announcements. I can tell you that we are continuing to work with the port on talking to truckers who are accessing the port terminals at 10th Avenue and National City about transitioning to zero emission vehicles. We've recently submitted comments on the SANDAG blueprint, which I think will have a lot of overlap with tonight's topic. And the pair work is in progress to make sure to help people get filters and air monitors in their homes in Portside. So I can share those updates.
Thanks, Joy. And Marita, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, hi guys, thank you. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an update. Some of you have heard, some might not know, but the Environmental Health Coalition, along with the San Diego Foundation and a whole cohort of different organizations, have been working together for I think over a year now for a grant called the Transformative Climate Communities. And so it's a state-funded grant from the Strategic Growth Council that's going to bring about $29.5 million to the community. And we actually have 8 communities that we have been calling the historic barrios. So it's Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, Mount Hope, Shelltown, Stockton, Grant Hill, and South Crest. And this is really a big effort to just, bring a lot of money into the community that's needed to be able to combat some of this pollution that we constantly are having. So wanted to just kind of give a quick synopsis of like what organizations are a part of it and everything. So we got, like I said, the lead applicant is the San Diego Foundation. We have about 8 projects that we are have in this grant. So the community land trust. We're going to have about 100 plus planting of trees. I'm sorry, it's not 100, 1,000 planting of trees throughout the communities. Holistic Healthy Homes is an initiative to be able to upgrade some of the older houses in our community. We're going to have some bus stop improvements as well as the 25th commercial trolley station. I'm sorry, my child is screaming in the background, so if you guys can hear that, my bad. The Chicano Park Museum is going to have some upgrades along with some solarization that will help bring more funding into the community as well. They're going to be having an electric shuttle bus that's kind of like a closed circuit bus for the community. Project New Village is going to be a center that's going to have like a commercial kitchen, food distribution, and other things of that nature. And then the Boston Avenue Park that is down on Boston Avenue, like the 5 freeway entrance. Along with that, we also have 3 transformative plans. So we're going to have a lot of workshops around workforce development, displacement avoidance, and just really having a lot of community engagement throughout. So I just wanted to kind of update y'all on that. We are so close to submission. August 1st, which is next Tuesday, is the final date. So we have all been kind of scrambling to get all this stuff done, but it is definitely an effort that we all are really excited to be a part of to bring this money to the community. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you, Maritza, and best of luck on getting it submitted. Moving along, I have Jack.
Thanks, Joey. Good evening, everyone. Jack Monger with IEA. Just wanted to share with you, you should have received earlier today an announcement that Chuy and Domingo put out to the steering committee with regard to an event we have on Thursday of this week that we thought might be of interest to members of the steering committee. It's one of our regular monthly meeting groups. It's our ESG committee. And as part of that presentation, we'll have Council President Sean Ilo Rivera, as well as Laura August, who is with the state's Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. She is going to talk about the CalEnviro screen and how that's being applied throughout the state and how the state is prioritizing projects and what this means for different communities in San Diego, and is certainly applicable to the Portside community. And Council President Ilo Rivera is going to talk about the city's climate equity index, which is sort of what the city has adopted from the CalEnviro screen and chooses to use for its own policymaking. So it's a good look at how those two groups are prioritizing projects and what this means for San Diego, for the city of San Diego, as well as for other communities in the state with regard to policymaking and project planning. So that'll be Thursday, 11:30 to 1. Everyone should have received a flyer. If you take a look at the flyer and you decide it's something you'd like to join, you're welcome. And all you need to do is click on the register button so that you can obtain the connection information for the virtual meeting on Thursday from 11:30 to 1. So that's all I have.
Great. Thanks, Jack. Sounds like a great event. And then last but not least, I have Sandag.
Great. Thank you, Chuy. Quick announcement. There is a online survey map comment tool available from Sandag. So it's for the 2025 regional plan, which we have already started working on. So this tool allows you to see it's a map of the region with all of the projects from the 2021 plan. And it allows you to add some comments. So if you have a comment that we need more transit here, we need more pedestrian facilities here, roadways, things like that, you can add comments on the map. We're asking for comments through August 31st so that we can take your feedback and incorporate projects into the regional plan accordingly. So I'll put the link in the chat. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tim. And thanks, everybody, for all the great updates. Moving along to our next agenda item. I'd like to open it up to steering committee members to consider a motion on approving today's agenda as well as last month's meeting notes. Jack?
Thanks, Chewy. I just had a question about the meeting notes that were put out in the email, general updates, in the specific reference to, because I was absent from the meeting, that's why I'm asking. So specific reference to it says San Diego APCD prepared a comment letter that was shared with the steering committee once finalized. So I just wondered, is that a letter that our steering committee voted on and chose to submit, or just what's the status on that particular letter? This is with regard to the U.S. Development Clean Fuels Group proposal for National City.
Great question. And Domingo, feel free to chime in, but that was a letter from the district themselves.
Yes, thank you. That's correct. That's a letter that the district provided to the city of National City. It's not an item for the CSC to vote on. It was just a letter that APCD authored and submitted and just shared as an FYI and as an update with the team.
Okay. Since I was absent from that meeting, how can I get a copy of that letter?
Oh, sure. We can send it over. I thought it was included on the meeting notes, but if not, we'll certainly make sure that we send it over.
Okay, and I'll check that. Maybe I missed it. Thanks, Domingo.
Oh, thank you.
Oh yeah, and I can resend it again, Jack, but I'm pretty sure I sent it to the committee.
Great.
Probably late June, right after.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions or a motion that anyone would like to make?
So move. Commissioner Naranjo, I so moved for approval of the minutes.
This is Sarah Giobbe. I'll second.
Great. And Sandy, does that also include tonight's agenda? Just to be.
Yes.
Great. And Sarah, do you agree to that?
Yes.
Thank you. Great. At this moment, we'll do a general vote. So if anyone is opposed or would like to abstain from this vote, please raise your hand. Seeing none, so the motion is approved. Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item, I'd like to hand over the mic over to Tim, who's going to give a presentation on the sustainable freight implementation strategy, which will include some polling questions to get your input.
Thanks, Chewy. Great. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name, once again, Tim Garrett, regional planner with Sandag, here to provide you with an update on our project, which is called the San Diego and Imperial Counties Sustainable Freight Implementation Strategy. Next slide, please. So freight is an essential part of our regional economy, and it plays a significant role in our daily lives. This was clear during the pandemic early on, with supply chain issues that we all experienced through work or through life, shortage of masks, electronic chips, medical devices, as well as toilet paper. We know that communities that are located near and around freight facilities also bear a disproportionate burden when it comes to air quality and pollution. So in order to address some of these issues and to meet state regulations, Sandag, the Imperial County Transportation Commission, and Caltrans have been developing the sustainable freight strategy. This plan intends to create a more sustainable supply chain network through regional freight projects, programs, and policies to reduce emissions and foster trade, which will meet our state climate, air quality, and public health goals. The key implementation objectives in this project are to develop and strengthen partnerships between the public agencies and the private sector, address environmental justice concerns from freight impacts, pilot innovative technologies, identify federal, state, and additional funding sources for implementation, and also address workforce gaps in implementing new technologies by creating a workforce development toolkit. Next slide, please. And so through this project, Sandag is using it as a way to align its priorities, Sandag, ICTC, and Caltrans, to align our priorities with the goal of improving overall freight sustainability. And so in many ways, this overlaps with the goals which are laid out in the Portside SERP. So I'll highlight a few of the goals and actions here by which where there's potential alignment. But ultimately, the outcomes of the study will depend on which strategies are prioritized for implementation. So like I said, we anticipate in meeting these ones. So these include reducing diesel particulate matter, facilitating zero emission transition for medium and heavy duty trucks, especially those going to destinations along the working waterfront. Next slide, please. Establishing zero emission truck charging and fueling infrastructure, and completing the Harbor Drive 2.0 truck freight improvements, which is something that you all heard about last month at a presentation from Mariella. And thank you very much for agreeing to send the letter of support on behalf of the committee after last month's meeting. Next slide, please. Also anticipate implementing several SERP actions, and these include the deployment of electric trucks, supporting dedicated truck routes to avoid truck impacts to local communities. Next slide, please. Increasing truck parking and staging facilities, especially those with electric and zero emission charging capabilities. Supporting the Harbor Drive multimodal corridor study land use proposals. Next slide, please. Improving transportation efficiencies, reducing emissions from ships at berth, and promoting zero emission technologies in general. And these are all aspects of improving freight sustainability, with the ultimate prioritization of what comes out of our project being determined through this process and informed by feedback from stakeholders. The next slide, please. So here's the timeline of the project overall. So since the project kicked off a year ago, the team has conducted literature review and analysis of best practices in sustainable freight from around the country and around the world. And so some of the things we learned early on were that the city of Santa Monica became the first city in the United States to pilot a zero emissions delivery zone. We learned about cargo bike usage being piloted in New York, Fort Lauderdale, Pittsburgh, and other cities. We also engaged after that in a number of public outreach efforts, which I'll get to in another slide or two. And then for the next several months, we're in the green area, which is developing the implementation plan. And then finally, we'll be finalizing the strategy at the end of the year and then early into 2024. Next slide, please. And here's the same information, but with the timeline in Spanish. So next slide, please. So over the course of the project, the team has been seeking feedback through from various stakeholders through a wide range of outreach efforts. So as we know, freight affects everyone, so we wanted to develop a robust outreach plan to engage stakeholders throughout the study in different ways. So some of these ways were including 10 stakeholder interviews, 4 virtual focus groups with folks representing different sectors. And those included health organizations, community-based organizations, workforce development groups, as well as freight industry and business organizations. We also conducted a public survey and appreciated that many members of the community, the Portside community, participated in that. So thank you for that. We had that survey open to the public for 5 weeks. The team also reached out to numerous CBOs, community-based organizations, and tribal groups to help promote the survey as well. And we received over 150 responses, which was great. And so we're incorporating the feedback as we prioritize different strategies for implementation. And that's a little screenshot in the bottom right corner of what the survey looked like. It was a map tool similar to the one that I put in the chat for the regional plan. And so we've also presented to committees and working groups in both counties and participated in community events. So some of the things that we've learned from these outreach efforts, some of the main themes, is that freight for some people is a very visible issue. It's very close to home, and so the impacts are felt every day. These include noise, traffic, emissions, and safety concerns. But for other community members where they're not located necessarily right next to those freight facilities, it's a little bit less of an obvious issue because they're not really experiencing it personally. We heard that there's a lot of enthusiasm for reducing environmental and equity impacts, both from the community and also from the freight industry. But we also heard some concerns that regulation through zero emission regulations, for example, impose a burden on the freight industry, which ultimately, while it has benefits, ultimately might be a cost that's passed on to consumers. We also heard concern about economic opportunities and making sure that folks have a chance to participate in some of this zero emission technology, getting the workforce skills that they need in order to be successful. But we also learned that some of these workforce development organizations are already working. They're hard at work at preparing the curricula so that folks can be prepared. Next slide, please. So taking this feedback, we take a look at existing projects, which were in the 2021 regional plan, prior regional plans. We looked at existing documentation for things like the Portside SERP. We looked at the Ports MCAS, the Maritime Clean Air Strategy, and we also looked at the relevant planning documents that relate to goods movement strategies in Imperial County. And we also wanted to develop some new projects and strategies that were taking some of the inspiration from the best practices around the country. But in order to evaluate all of those projects, we needed some screening criteria. So specifically here, we're looking at the benefits to equity, the environment, and the economy and competitiveness, which are located on the left-hand side. So equity was a consideration of whether projects would benefit vulnerable and most vulnerable communities. And this was demonstrated through AB 617 communities, as well as the Cal EnviroScreen scoring tool. The environmental impacts, where we considered the impacts of the project on reducing emissions and pollution. And then the economy and competitiveness criterion considered improvements in efficiency and capacity of the freight industry, where benefits to that would benefit consumers and businesses, providing economic activity and employment opportunities. And so on the right are the different project types that we were considering. Probably familiar with port of entry projects, rail projects, and many others that we were considering. Next slide, please. And so high priority projects, or the ones with the most benefits, are going to be the ones that we're considering for inclusion in the 2025 regional plan, which is a really important document that sets out our priorities for the next 20 to 30 years. And so some of these include truck-only lanes, where we know trucks are going to be traveling to facilities like industrial areas, rail yards, and ports of entry. Grade separations, which are projects to separate conflict points between streets and railroads, mostly benefit surface traffic by reducing idling and safety concerns, but you can also imagine that there are reliability improvements for the trains as well. Truck parking area is very important because truck drivers need to rest in accordance with federal regulations. So it's a safety consideration so that we don't have unsafe, overtired truck drivers on the road. And some of those, it's possible to add amenities like zero emission charging and ventilation hookups so that folks don't have to run their engines while they're at those stations. And it supports the regional network of publicly accessible charging and fueling stations, which you've heard about a few months ago when my colleague Jeff presented on our medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle blueprint. And then finally, commercial port of entry projects, because as it is right now, trucks and cars waiting to cross the border have to wait a long time. And while they're doing that, they're idling, they're creating pollution, which is not good for health, but it's also not good for the economy to have those trucks sitting there. It's much more efficient for them to get where they're going, and that's better for the economy overall. And so we're looking at different technologies, both for zero emission charging as well as appointment systems to make crossing more efficient. Next slide, please. And some specific opportunities, we've looked at both Imperial County and San Diego County, so I'll highlight a few of them here. We're looking at implementing wireless in-road charging as a way to keep electric batteries charging while trucks are in line to cross at ports of entry. We could also look at deploying that in other areas where trucks are waiting. Looking to upgrade truck parking areas with zero emission charging and fueling facilities. This could be applied at publicly owned rest areas like the ones that Caltrans operates, as well as private truck stops like we have seen with the recent unveiling of electric truck charging in Otay Mesa at the TruckNet facility. And then the next strategy focuses on providing a green light and more efficient travel for trucks via freight signal priority at intersections. And this is really the Harbor Drive 2.0 proposal that you heard about last month. And that's also in the Portside SERP as one of the main goals. Next slide, please. A few others just to highlight: truck-only lanes, because they can make freight signal priority effective, but they also can separate slower moving traffic from faster moving traffic, which is good for separating those for safety. Let's see. Also looking at truck climbing lanes on temporary lanes on steep routes, for example, State Route 52, for the same reason, just separating different speeds of traffic for safety, and grade separations throughout the county. But in particular, we've heard feedback from folks in the community that the grade crossings in Chula Vista should be prioritized, 28th and 32nd Streets, which are also those are also in the Portside SERP, and that's not Chula Vista, that's San Diego, my apologies. Next slide, please. And so we'll get into the interactive portion of the presentation here. So we've gotten lots of feedback on the projects because we had those a little bit more developed at the time we were doing our project survey earlier on. But I'd love to get your feedback on some of the policies and programs that we're considering. So I'll describe them here briefly, see if there's any questions, and then we can launch a poll to get your feedback, and happy to entertain any comments at that point. So some of the ones that we're considering for policies: toll discounts for zero emission trucks, which would encourage adoption of those trucks in advance of mandates. Looking at low and zero emission zones, which could require that deliveries being made by certain types of vehicles, be they lower zero emissions only. And that could be, attached to some sort of deterrent, like a financial penalty. Looking at creating recommendations from the SANDAG side for industrial land use and truck parking areas, warehouse areas, inland ports, things like that. Ultimately, local cities are responsible for their land use, but SANDAG could get to make some recommendations and incentives to align those with best practices. And then the final policy here is filling in gaps in the regional truck network. And this would look at existing truck routes, primarily in rural areas that have geometric restrictions that don't allow trucks of all sizes to travel, and it requires them to go significantly out of the way to reach their destinations. And that's excess travel that we don't necessarily want to have. So before we launch the poll from the facilitation team, I want to see if there's any questions on these policies that I can clarify. But basically the question that I'm looking to know is if you would be willing to support these policies, not support these policies, or somewhere in the middle. And you can rank 1 through 3 for each of those policies. So I see a hand up from Joy. Go ahead, Joy.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Very interesting presentation. I'm not understanding though quite how this relates to the overall blueprint. Like, how are these projects related to the big picture planning for where charging infrastructure goes in the region, for example? And for example, looking at equity considerations, I think it's a bit nuanced. Like, yes, we need charging infrastructure on the port terminals, so that we can facilitate those drayage trucks becoming zero emission vehicle. But we might want to see, not so much charging in the more, residential areas of Portside and the South Bay. We might want to see more charging throughout the region so that trucks aren't going to those terminals to charge us. And how are we collecting data so that we make sure that we're implementing policies that make sense for the region? So that was long-winded, but that's my question. Thank you, Tim.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Joy. And I'm glad you brought up the blueprint, because the blueprint really does get into some of those more specifics, especially when it comes to siting criteria, where they should be located, in industrial areas, at the marine terminals, in residential areas. So the blueprint gets into more specifics. This project, the Sustainable Freight Strategy, is really about determining where the priorities for where we want to put our resources as an agency. and where we want to focus our efforts as as we look out 20, 30 years, what types of projects should we be looking to deploy throughout the region. So it's really about determining kind of a ranking and priority order and what types of things we should be supporting through our investments. See a hand from Sylvia.
Yes, hi, Tim. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the latest updates. I truly appreciate it. I'm learning a lot. But I do have a question that was mentioned in regards to the tracking, the zero emissions trucks that are, hopefully getting our air quality that has been improved. But my concern is in regards to data collecting. Do we have a list or a registry for these type of trucks that are coming in and exiting the port of San Diego? And if there is, how are you exactly measuring the progress of this taking place?
Yeah, so I can't answer that question specifically. I know that there is I want to say it's the California Energy Commission keeps track of the number of registered vehicles throughout the state by fuel type. So there is a list of all of the zero emission trucks that are being registered in the state. I believe it's the California Energy Commission, maybe it's CARB, but I'm not able to speak to if there's any local registries about where the trucks are coming and going and if they're zero emission.
Right, it'll be nice to know exactly where we are at this point and if we have been progressing or not, and make the necessary steps to improve, because I understand data is very important to create a good analysis of where we are at this point. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Hand from Jack.
Hi, Tim. Thanks. I just had a quick question about the wireless charging technology. Does that already exist? And if so, do you know where it's actually being used?
Yeah, so it's being deployed, I think, in like a pilot demonstration phase in Sweden and Israel, I want to say. I'm not sure that there's been a domestic US deployment of it yet. I know that Sandag's very interested in pursuing it, and we've gotten some grants to pursue, kind of prepare ourselves for pilots. I'm not aware that there's been any deployments yet in the US.
Great, that could be a huge, huge benefit at the border with the idling trucks waiting to cross the border. So that I hadn't heard about that before. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. It's very exciting. I know there's a lot of kinks to work out. It's a new technology, so I think that's typical, but we're interested in the promise.
All right.
I see Joy again.
Hi, just to follow up on Sylvia's question, I mean, this might be a good time for Phil to weigh in on what's happening with the ports truck registry. I think he said that he was going to do that at some point.
Good segue.
Well, it's a good thing I have my hand up. I had a question for Tim, but I'll just answer, I guess, that question that's directed at the port. I mean, the port is in the process of developing a truck tracking system at our terminal so that we could have an accurate number of the trucks that are coming in, and we'll be able to distinguish their fuel type, whether they're diesel, whether they're electric or zero emission in the future. So that is being tested right now. We're in the final phases, if you will, of installing that system. So that's good news. But just to let everybody know, I mean, the strategy that Tim is presenting right now is for 2 counties where there's, lots more trucks, right? There's 1 million trucks that are going through the border every year. So we're one small part of that for the tracking purposes. How all those other trucks are going to be tracked is above my pay grade. So that's just what the port is doing. But one question for you, Tim, or maybe just a comment, and sorry if we're throwing you off on your poll that you want to do, but one thing I would like to advocate for here in your strategy is heavyweight allowances for the roads. You know, these zero emission trucks are really heavy. They're much heavier than their diesel counterparts, which means that there's going to be reduced payloads on those vehicles. One thing that I think can spur adoption of these vehicles will be allowances for heavy weights over the road. As you know, and the community members out here may not know, is that trucks are capped at 80,000 pounds over the road. If you're an alternative fuel vehicle, you get 2,000 extra pounds, but these trucks can exceed, the electric trucks can exceed that difference. And so allowances of heavier weights, let's say up to 90,000 pounds, is something that I would definitely advocate for. That's my comment for now, but thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. We do. I just don't have it necessarily noted here as a policy, but that is kind of included with some of the project ideas as we consider truck only lanes, creating them to be extra strong in accordance or in anticipation that policies would be allowing higher weight trucks on those facilities. So yeah, we're definitely considering that. So appreciate you pointing that out.
Great, thanks everybody for the great questions. Do want to keep us moving along. So Joannie, if you can pull up the poll for the policies, that'd be great. So folks are welcome to rank their level of support for each of these policies on the slide, as well as in the poll, which are the same, with one being little to no support and 3 being strongly supporting.
And I'll add that if folks have if they want to elaborate on a response, feel free to put it in the chat. Definitely appreciate all the feedback, as well as the poll results.
Keep this on schedule. We'll give it 30 more seconds. And please be sure to hit submit at the bottom. Okay, giving folks one last chance. Great. Can you end the poll, Johnny, and show results? Great. And Tim, feel free to walk through these.
Great. Yeah. So it looks like it's definitely on the strongly supporting side in terms of toll discounts for zero emission trucks. Want to incentivize that. Similar, but maybe less enthusiastic for low and zero emission zones as a policy. I'd say it looks like similar to number 2 for industrial land use recommendations, and then definitely a bit more split when it comes to filling gaps in the regional truck network. Yeah, it looks like moderate support is the strongest response there. So that's good feedback. Thank you. Okay, move on to the next slide, please. And so this is part 2 of the interactive section. So proposed programs. So I'll just briefly describe these. So the first is a proposal to make more funding available for local businesses to purchase zero emission trucks. Second one is a truck traveler information system where Sandag would collect regional transportation data and broadcast it out, likely through an app that has information specifically geared towards truckers. The last mile delivery pilots is about supporting vehicles, technology, regulations in order to test out innovative strategies and determine which would work well in different environments. Zero emission locomotive incentives, similar to the first one, except making funding available for zero emission trains. And then truck charging and parking site development, where Sandag would take a more active role in development for publicly available charging and parking facilities. So we want to see if there's any questions on clarifications on these policies. And then once again, appreciate your votes on if you'd support, not support, or if you want to elaborate in the chat, your opinion, that would be great.
Can you repeat what the last minute delivery pilots is?
Yeah, so the last mile delivery pilots could really be a bunch of things. It could be incentives for cargo bikes. We could be seeing some pilot projects for delivery robots. It could be delivery kind of package lockers. It could also be piloting what we call dynamic curb use. So, you know, most curbs have just kind of static rules. You can park here for 2 hours. You can park here for an unlimited amount of time. This would be actively managing the curb so that delivery drivers could book a time, make their delivery. They don't have to double park in the middle of the street to make their delivery, but they can, you know, make a delivery with an assured time and be out of everyone's way. So it's a variety of things, but it's about increasing the efficiency of the deliveries to our homes and businesses.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Please continue to submit your responses to the poll. And we'll give it 30 more seconds. Tim, I do want to flag that Joy had another comment, question, and maybe
let me take a look at that.
Domingo might be able to support, but
yeah, okay. Unclear how the SERP and gas goals and priorities will be incorporated into the blueprint. So yeah. So I'll just say, and I think Phil kind of touched on it, how, you know, the port is, you know, one part of the county. The Portside SERP applies to, you know, a part of the county, and we're definitely taking those things into consideration. And, you know, I think we have drawn a lot of inspiration from what has been published in those documents, but also recognizing that it's a much broader geography that we're considering with this project. This one in particular is both San Diego and Imperial counties. So the strategies that we're proposing to implement in both counties are quite different. Imperial County being much more rural and agricultural kind of focused. And so the facilities that we're recommending there are different from what we have in the more urbanized areas and portside areas, for example. But we're trying to align as much as we can, definitely the spirit of those, but recognizing that the scales of analysis are really different.
thanks, Tim. Joanny, could you share the results?
Okay, thank you. So I see support for the first program, truck incentives, zero emission truck incentives, support for the second one, truck traveler information system. Maybe a little bit more tempered support for last mile delivery pilots, and then similar for zero emission locomotives. Strong support for truck parking and charging site development. So that's also very good to know that that's a priority for this group. Appreciate that feedback. Phil, I see a hand.
Thanks, Tim. Question. How does this strategy, I mean, I see that we're talking about zero emission vehicles here, which is consistent with the MCAS and the SERP. You know, zero emission locomotives, that's great. I think you said something about shore power for vessels at one point. I may be wrong. How about equipment? You know, part of the freight logistics arena, right? There's equipment that's also operating at distribution centers, at ports, at freight facilities, you know, you name it, where there's freight, there's a piece of equipment that's moving something. Is that included in here? Have we not seen that yet? If not, definitely include it because it's an important component of getting to zero.
Noted. Thanks. Yeah, we don't have it called out specifically in this slide, but yeah, recognizing that cargo handling equipment is part of the equation. It's not just trucks and trains. Yeah, so comment noted. We'll make sure that that's emphasized.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Probably move on to the next slide. I'm almost done. Okay, just pull up my notes again. Okay, so thank you all for your feedback. Really appreciate that. So just basically the next steps that we're working on to close out the project, identifying for each of these projects and programs and policies what it would cost at a high level to implement them in terms of our capacity and if we have funding available and what it would take to get funding available to implement these. How they match up, and then determining how they should be phased for implementation. So we're taking all of that feedback into consideration as we develop that. We'll also be identifying the training programs to provide the workforce with the skills needed to operate and maintain new technologies and infrastructure. And then we'll be sharing that out once that's available. And so we'll be wrapping this up in 2024 and happy to share with the group once we have final documentation, come back to more presentations if you like, and share that with the group. And so next slide, please. So you heard from Mariella last month. She is the project manager on this project, but she couldn't be present for the meeting today. That's me in the middle, and then Jose Marquez Chavez, I believe he's also on the call today. He's a member of the project development team from Caltrans. And then we also have ICTC, Virginia Mendoza, and I don't have the contact info there. So with that, thank you for the time to present today. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. I think we got some good feedback from the policies and program section, but I'm definitely willing to entertain any more questions. And if you have any follow-up, please feel free to email me.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. I think we'll let Phil just have one more question or comment, and then I will encourage folks to please email Tim or Mariela.
All right, thanks. Tim, and I'm sorry if I missed this at the beginning. Can you explain just the importance of this plan? Like, so you've taken our input in tonight, you're collecting input from others. At some point, this is going to be approved, and it helps direct investment into San Diego. But by approving some plan like this, does the federal government, is this are you guaranteed funding, for example, to implement this, or is it just sort of a wish list of activities and initiatives that we're all interested in? What happens once this is adopted?
Yeah, so I think it's probably closer to the wish list. It's not a required plan through any federal or state requirements. It's funded through a grant program, Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant Program. And so we wanted to do this to develop a local implementation strategy for the California Sustainable Freight Action Plan, which is a state level document that really sets the priorities at the state level for what gets funded. Projects are supposed to be consistent with that. So we wanted to develop the same thing internally. But this is also, we also see it as a way to get buy-in and get support for projects. So this is more outreach than I think that doing the outreach and hearing from folks about what the priorities are is hopefully important. And we see it as important for getting support for implementing these projects moving forward, demonstrating that we've talked through what the priorities are for different communities. So I'd say it's more of a wish list, but I think the support definitely helps. And when we look to you for support in the future, hopefully this will be a basis for that. Hope that was a good answer.
Thanks, Tim. And please encourage folks to continue reaching out to Sandag if you have any questions or comments. Jack?
Thanks, Julie. Tim, just one last question, and that had to do with as you are developing this sustainable freight plan, how will Sandag handle it if the goals of developing sustainable freight conflict with the goals in the SERP?
I like to say that they're mostly aligned, so I'm not really, I would say, because we are considering environmental equity and economic benefits, I think that those three considerations really take into account, alignment with other plans, including the SERP. So I'd say if they didn't align, then it would probably be an inaction, but not necessarily like opposing plans. They just may not speak to each other as much.
Thanks. I mean, obviously, and that's probably the condition that we're in right now is different interests that are trying to ensure that we have all of the freight infrastructure and freight capacity that are needed by businesses to remain in good employers, good businesses in good standing. And at the same time, though, we're also trying to address the goals of the SERP. And I think it wouldn't be a far reach to imagine that there will be a time where there might be a conflict between the two, and just wondering how Sandag would, that's what I was just wondering if Sandag had a plan for how they were going to address that. I think we'd be probably remiss if we imagined that the goals of both of those programs are always going to be in line with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a great response at the moment. Sandag is one of the implementing agencies on the SERP, and obviously if we're developing our own strategy internally, want to implement those things as well, because that's the direction we're determining for ourselves. So I'm not sure how we would handle a conflict.
Okay,
honest, so
something to think about. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, everybody, for staying a little over what we had planned for. But moving on to our next slide, did want to give just a few minutes for public comment if anybody has anything they'd like to share or request for future agenda meetings. Again, you're always welcome to email me as well. And Jack, I think that hand is from before. So I'll move on to John, following by Sylvia.
Is that me?
Yes.
I've been asked by many community members that some time back, there was a discussion about putting a cap, if you will, over Interstate 5 along the, if you will, over the freeway, but here, basically across the street from Logan Avenue. And I'm wondering if there's ever been any more discussion as to whether or not that would be a viable option. I know that particularly when towards the evening, the weather, as it cools, most of the particulate matter kind of settles into where Interstate 5 is at. And then, of course, when it heats up in the morning, it bubbles over on both sides of the freeway. So I was just wondering if there's ever been any thought about that. And, that's my question.
Thanks, John. That's a great question. Wondering if Caltrans or Sandag have any response to this, or we can follow up with those folks afterwards.
I want to say, this is Tim from Sandak. I want to say that we submitted a grant application to study that. I don't believe that we were successful. I think that that is a very popular program. There's Reconnecting Communities program nationwide that was exploring funding studies to explore putting freeway caps and breaking down other barriers between communities. And it was a very popular program nationwide. I don't think we were successful. I do believe we are planning on continuing to pursue it in the future. So I'll let you know if we have updates on that.
Thanks, Tim. Sylvia?
Thank you, Choi. I just wanted to, in regard to the previous question I had on the truck registry, I'm still curious to see if there is an update. I personally have not heard anything. So I was wondering if you could assist us with that. See if we have any new numbers or anything that we could go about. So this is a truck registry from the Port of San Diego, basically. Thank you, Choi.
Right. I think Phil might have a response to this.
I apologize. I'm confused on what the question is asking. Is it asking how many zero emission trucks are coming to the port currently? Is it asking just how many truck trips come to the port? I apologize.
Correct.
I'm
Basically,
confused on what you're asking for.
basically what's coming in and out of the port, just
Yeah.
for us to get an idea, because I understand there was going to be an update by the end of June. So we're in July. I don't know where we're at this point.
An update to the SERP group? Sorry, again, I'm just not tracking exactly the timelines and stuff
An
you're asking
update
about.
to the registry, the truck registry.
Oh,
of what's
okay,
coming
got
in
it.
and out.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said earlier, we've installed a system at one of our terminals at this point, and then we're testing it out. A lot of effort goes into building this type of system, and we're just
Right.
making sure that it's functioning correctly. There's a lot of external databases that our truck registry needs to grab information from to make it successful. So we're making sure that all those components are working. And not to go into the weeds, but some of those external databases aren't ready for prime time yet. So there's a lag. And then we'll be deploying the truck tracking system at our other terminals as well throughout the summer. So we should have some good data collecting by the end of the year. But generally, just so you all know, I mean, about 100,000 truck calls visit our terminals between 10th Avenue and National City on an annual basis. And then we have numbers on, the different products that those trucks serve, et cetera. And then the last thing I'll mention, we are doing a 2022 calendar year air emissions inventory at our port, and included in that will be an analysis of emissions from all the sources, from ships, from trucks, from cargo handling equipment. And in that, when we're completed, we'll have a good representation of the trucks that came to our terminal, and we'll have better information to present regarding that at a later date.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate that you're providing us with what's happening at least. I understand the analysis part. It takes a long time. I come from an analytical perspective, so we appreciate, giving us this update at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And, hopefully perhaps next month or in a future CERP meeting, we can give you an update holistically on a lot of the various truck related activities that we've been up to at the port, and also with our friends throughout the region, including EHC.
Excellent. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sylvia and Phil. Great. Moving along to our next agenda item, which are closing remarks. We just wanted to thank everyone again for your participation and engagement with the presentation materials, as well as all the other announcements that folks have been sharing. We also want to remind folks that next month, our meeting will take place in person at what we're almost finished confirming, which will be at the Chicano Museum, which we met last February. So hoping to see folks again in person, where subcommittees will have an opportunity to meet again and provide updates to the broader group. With that, we'd like to close out the meeting and give everyone a little more time than usual for their Tuesday evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Gracias.
Thank you, Josephine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you. Great meeting.